we saw that in the Shastra Adhyayana Krama, there is a sequence that we have to follow. Otherwise, we will never be able to appreciate not only the depth of the Shastra, but also what is the purpose of the Shastra, that also we will miss. So we had already seen the Anubandha Chatushtaya, which is how the Adhikari, Vishaya, Sambandha and the Phala. And we also are now seeing the Linga Tatparya Nirnaya. Linga means essence, Tatparya means gist. In the Linga Tatparya Nirnaya, there are 7 steps. The 7 steps are the perfect beginning, Upakrama, a proper ending which is relevant to the beginning, Upasamhara, and then how to practice the concepts, because unless something is practical, there is no use. So how to practice all these concepts, Abhyasa, and then it must be something which is not easily available. In fact, which is something very difficult to get, or which is very rare, that is Apurvata. And there must be a very powerful, worthy, valuable outcome. Apurvata and Phalam can be taken as 2 separate words to mean that it is rare and it is also having an outcome. We can also combine the two, saying that it is Apurvata Phalam, an outcome which is very, very rare to get. So in both ways, the latter one is probably even more appropriate. You get a Apurva Phalam. Apurva means never ever in the past in your life have you ever experienced such a wonderful outcome in your study. That is the meaning of rarity. So such a rarity we have to experience, and then there has to be explanatory statements to maintain the continuity and logic between Upakrama, the beginning, and Upasamhara, the end. So never ever we should lose the thread of the flow. And then Upapatticha, for the sake of the comfort and interest in the study, there must also be anecdotes. So that is called as Upapatti or Drishtanta. So in these, we have already studied the Anubandha Chatushtaya, the 4-fold prerequisites. We have also seen the beginning, the end, the practice, Abhyasa. Now we have to see the rarity, Apurvata. So again, referring back to the mantras in the Rudradhyaya itself, sometimes we meditate upon very apparently negative and harmful entities. For example, Taskarayacha, to a thief, isn't it? So now this has got a certain rarity there. In this rarity, why should you bow down to a thief? I also mentioned to you that in Shastrabhyasa study, we should also map the Adi Bhautika. That means a concept has to be mapped on to something that is physical and outside of us, Adi Bhautika. We also have to map it on to a deity, Adi Daivika. And then we should also map it on to the essence or the Adhyatmika. In all these 3 levels, we should apply each and every one of the concepts. So, Namo Taskaraya Cha. So, let us take that as an example. How do we map this on to Adi Bhautika, to the external? A thief is a harmful entity in society. Because there is a human nature that there are always thieves in every society, we need to create the infrastructure where we have an institution, we have the police, we have law and order, we have government. Just imagine all this structure with reference to a theft in the society. We need this infrastructure. So therefore, when you map Taskaraya Cha Namaha, so many of these entities are existing and functioning Because there are thieves in the society. I'm just taking as an example. So many people will get employment, so many laws will be passed. That means a structure will come to the society, and the society will be thinking not only as a homogeneous social group where the various elements like and live with each other in harmony, but also to keep at bay those disharmonious and harmful entities. So this is the mapping of the Adibhautika. Now let's look at Adidaivika. So whom do you on the top of your head remember who will steal things? We have our famous Lord Krishna who will commit theft of your butter, of beautifully churned butter. And not only that, he is also a Chitta Chora. He is the one who steals your mind. Isn't it? So now you suddenly see what happened to this mantra. Namo Taskaraya Cha. You are now thinking, oh, my Lord Krishna is the one to whom we are offering namaskara. Isn't it? So look at the experience of this one mantra. At the outset, if you are reading the translation of the mantra, which you will in 90% of the books, you will be thinking, what kind of a text is this? But only when you map Adibhautika, Adidaivika, you will understand the depth. What about the Adhyatmika? The Adhyatmika is our senses hijack our mind. So the taskaras of the mind, the thieves of the mind are our senses. So who is the lord of the senses? The lord of the senses is the mind. In the Vaishnava tradition of thinking, Madhvacharya's tradition of thinking, there is what is known as the Taratamya or relative positions for the various deities. And each one of these deities represent a particular aspect of our personality. For example, when you say Narayana, Narayana means it is the self, it is Brahman, it is Paramatman, it is Atman. When you say Rudra, Rudra is the lord of the mind. He is what they call as Manas Abhimani Devata. So, Manas Abhimani Devata Rudra, this is the Adidaivika mapping, that Rudra has been stolen by the sense organs. And therefore, we are saying, how can you, my very mind, be stolen? And we also remember at this point the Gita Acharya's statement in the Sthita Prajna part of the Gita, Yatato hyapi kaunteya purushasya vipaschitaha. Purushasya, of a human being, vipaschitaha, who is wise and who has got discrimination. This is not an ordinary person who is weak. A highly discriminatory person, purushasya vipaschitaha, indriyani prabhathini. Math means to actually stir, to actually mix, to create trouble. And how do they create trouble? Prakarshena, in great force. Indriyani pramathini haranti prasabham manaha. They actually very forcefully, prasabham means forcefully, with great force, the mind is stolen. Therefore, what do we do? In Adhyatmika contemplation of Taskarayacha, we immediately say sense organs are very, very quickly take away my deity Rudra from me. And therefore, in the Adidaivika mapping, we map Taskara to the Indriyas, to all our sense organs. And then we start controlling that, like the tortoise withdraws all its limbs into its shell. So this is an apurvata. Have you ever seen this understanding of a thief? We have always, separated that here is a civilized society and there is a underground. And this concept of difference is disappearing. That difference, why it should disappear and what it will do to us, also we will see as we study each one of the mantras. So, we'll take one more example. There is the mantra Agre Vadhaya Cha, Dure Vadhaya Cha. Now, in Agre Vadhaya Cha, Dure Vadhaya Cha, we will try to understand this mantra with an anecdote, with a drishtanta, with upapatti. See, because we got to adopt all the techniques that we can to come to the purport of the teaching. So, what do we mean by Agre Vadhaya Cha? Agre means coming right in front of me. Vadhaya Cha, he will slay me. Dure Vadhaya Cha, he will stand at a distance and from a distance he will kill us. So in the same sentence, both these are there. One who protects the devotee from danger by standing in front of the devotee is Agre Vadhaya Cha. What is the example? You know the famous story from the Mahabharata that Krishna was the charioteer for Arjuna, and then on top of his chariot is Bhima. So how did Bhima end up on top of his... Hanuman. How did he end up on top of his chariot? Hanuman end up on top of his chariot. Sometime back, there was a very beautiful fragrance of a flower that was coming from the Himalayas. And Draupadi asked Bhima, that's where I got the name Bhima, asked Bhima, I want that flower. So Bhima goes in search of that flower. And on the way, there was an old monkey who was sitting on the road, and the tail had stretched to the other end of the street. In Indian culture, in Hindu culture, Vedic culture, there is a rule that you will never cross over a person's body. So you don't just step over. Suppose somebody is lying, you don't step over across. It is an insult to the Atman, to the self. So Bhima requests this old monkey, please move your tail. And then the monkey says, oh, I'm very old, I cannot get up and move it. You move it yourself and go on your way. And then Bhima thinks it's very easy, just take his tail and push it. He tries with his left hand, right hand, all his might, but he was not able to move. And then he immediately realizes this must be a great soul. And he prostrates before him, surrenders to him, and then says, please forgive me, I don't know who you are. Then Hanuman says, I am Hanuman, Rama Bhakta. So all you had to say was, Sri Rama Jayam, Jai Ram, Jai Ram, I would have left you my way. I would have left the way for you. But since you wanted to show your strength, I had to. But however, I am very pleased with you. What boon would you like to have? Now you see, Bhima doesn't ask any boon for himself. He says, you please come and protect my brother Arjuna by sitting on top of his chariot. Look at the nobility of that. So that is how Hanuman ends up on top of the chariot of Krishna and Arjuna. So the war is over. At the end of the war, Krishna drives the chariot home and asks Arjuna to jump off the chariot. But Arjuna had so much of respect for Krishna by now that he had learned Bhagavad Gita from him. He says, no sir, how can I get out? I would be treating you like a menial driver. So you please get off first. Then very sternly, Krishna says, no, you get off, it's an order. And he jumps off. Right behind him, Hanuman jumps off. And when Krishna jumped off, the entire chariot caught fire and it was reduced to ashes. So, what was Krishna's presence throughout the war with reference to these incidents? Agre vadhaya cha. See, this is how we incorporate the drishtanta or the example to understand. Now let's look at the next phrase, dure vadhaya cha. So what instance in the Mahabharata can we think about dure vadhaya cha? Draupadi, that's one, dure vadhaya cha. So we will see his slaying from not being there. The Arjuna asks Krishna, Senayor ubhayor madhye ratham sthapaya vechyuta. Between the two armies, stop my chariot. And this fellow, he takes this chariot, he could have parked it in any corner, but he parks it right in front of his grandfather and his guru. That anecdote you know. But then, after parking, he will say, look at all these people. Pashetan kurun iti. Look at all these kurus. So he looked at them, right? Still the war has not started. Bhagavad Gita teaching is going on. Let's come to 11th chapter. In the 11th chapter, in the 33rd verse, Krishna says, Mayai vetaha nihataha purvameva nimittamatram bhava savyasachin. So what is the meaning of this? I have in the past killed all these fellows. You just become an instrument. Subtext. All these people are all walking corpses. That is all. They are already killed. Among all the Kauravas, and even Arjuna does not understand its significance. It is understood only by Bhishma. At the end, he says, Lord, I know that time when you stopped Arjuna's chariot in front of me and you looked at me, you had already killed me. And I was just there physically fighting, but I really was already killed. Dure vadhaya cha. So how do we interpret this mantra? Until such time that each and every one of us who are studying the Rudradhyaya develop the devotion to the Lord, to Ishvara, at this point of time, if we don't develop, we are all walking corpses only. Dure vadhaya cha. Again, to drive home the very important point, saying that the ultimate purpose, what is it we saw in the flow in Shravana Manana Nididhyasa. In the Nididhyasa part, it must end, as Srimad Ramanujacharya said, Shemushi Bhaktihi. Shemushi means Jnana. It must always end with a devotion which is coupled with knowledge. If we don't do that, we are all dure vadhaya cha. So I'm just giving you two samples of how we are going to study the text. And then, in fact, simultaneously I was also reading, for some other occasion, the Bible. If you look at Psalm number 103, you will see many of these being reflected. Extraordinarily beautiful psalm. So what is the phalam for all this study? The one who is studying the Rudra, who is understanding the Rudra, will become Rudra. Justifying the statement, Na Rudro Rudramarchayet, without yourself becoming Rudra, you cannot successfully worship Rudra. The mantra ends by saying, Ayam me hasto bhagavan, Ayam me bhagavattaraha. Now my hand has become the hand of Shiva. In fact, my hand has become better than Shiva's hand. That's the exclamation of the sage. Ayam me bhagavattaraha. Then, what is the second pala that we will see? Namo Rudraya Vishnave Mrityurme Pahi. Om Namo. My salutations, Rudraya to Rudra, Vishnave to Vishnu, Mrityurme Pahi. Save me from death. What death? It is not the death of the body. It is walking about like corpses. From that to death, save me. So there Rudradhyaya is going to take us. It is not for an ordinary reason that Rudra has become so much loved from time immemorial. Then, what is this real Mrityu? It is Ajnana and Avidya. Only when Ajnana and Avidya are removed, we are truly living. We will be living even after death. See, that's the enigma of this whole text. Is Krishna dead or alive today? Is Rama dead or alive today?
Alive.
Very much alive, isn't it? And this study of the Rudra is going to make us that immortal. That is why we will say Namo Rudraya Vishnave Mrityurme Pahi. And then you may be wondering why the sage is saying Rudraya Vishnave, why he has to take these two names. Later on in the first mantra, the first Anuvaka, we are going to see the arrow of Shiva. That arrow of Shiva is none other than Vishnu himself. So when I come to that, I will talk more about that. Then explanatory statements, finally, called Arthavada. How do we see Arthavada? Let me give you an example. Namo Rudrebhyo Ye Prithivyam Ye Antarikshe Ye Divi Yo Rudro Agnavyo Apsu Yavoshadhishu Yo Rudro Vishwa Bhuvana Vivesha Tasmai Rudraya Namo Astu. How do you understand the omnipresence of Rudra? So you pick up the most important aspects of environment which you constantly observe. You know that is the earth. Ye Rudra Prithivyam, that Rudra who is in the earth. Ye Antarikshe, who is there in the space. Ye Divi, who is in the heavens. Who is in Agni, Yo Agnav, in water. Apsu, in herbs. Oshadhishu. And then he who created the entire universe, Bhuvana Vivesha, to that I bow down. So this is how we use Arthavada or explanatory statements to understand the conveyance of the meaning of this text. Finally, Upapatti, that is all the Drishtantas or examples. For examples, I am slowly collecting, I have collected about 25-26 pictures of the various stories and aspects represented in the Rudradhyaya in temple iconography. So I will share that with you as soon as I have completed that preparation of that work. So that the beauty of that is whenever you go to India and you go to any of those temples, you can go to that particular icon, that particular temple, and then also see. For example, one of the things is Jambhe Dadhami. I mentioned about that last week. There is a beautiful temple, the Chaturmukha Mahadeva temple in Madhya Pradesh, where in that temple there is a four-faced Shivalinga. One of the faces has open mouth. So I've got a picture of that. I will show that all that to you, so that as soon as I've done it, we will project it on our television. So that way, the explanatory notes coupled with the stories from the Puranas. For example, Namaste Astu Bhagavan Vishveshwaraya. So you think of Kashi. Mahadevaya Triambakaya, the one who slayed the three cities. Tripurantakaya, Trikagni Kalaya, Kalagni Rudraya, Neelakantaya, Mrityunjayaya, the story of Markandeya. Mrityunjayaya, Sarveshwaraya. Like that, you will also have many anecdotes. Final part about the Shastra Adhyayana Krama. This, for Shastra Adhyayana Krama conveyance, I used Rudra. Actually, you must use this for every single text you study. Even for Bhagavad Gita, you have got to apply the same rules. When you are studying the Upanishad, you have to apply the same rules. Then there will be very structured study. So, final question is, what is the purpose of Shastra? Why do we need scripture? The answer for that was simply and beautifully given by a great Sri Vaishnava scholar, Yamunacharya. Yamunacharya wrote a short text called Bhagavad Gita Sara Sarvasva. It is very few, probably 25-30 verses. In that he says, Asthana Karunya Sneha Dharma Adharma Dhiyakulam. Asthana Karunya. We misplace our emotions in wrong people, in wrong situations, at wrong times. You are very attached to your child. And whatever things your child is doing, you become compassionate with your child. And in consequence, what are we doing? We are actually making that child not so useful to the society. So it is Asthana Karunya. Shastra opens our eyes as to where we should show compassion, where we should show attachment, where we should very decisively remove some of the negativities. And Dharma Adharma Dhiyakulam, confusion between Dharma and Adharma. That's why so much debate goes on about why Rama did this, why Krishna did that. Because the confusion of what is Dharma and what is Adharma, Partham Prapannam Uddeshya. One who surrendered to Krishna, the devotee who surrendered to the deity, to him Shastra Avataranam Kritam. Shastra Avataranam Kritam. Shastra descends into our lives only for the sake of removing improper compassion, asthana karunya, unsustainable sneha, attachment, confusion between dharma and adharma. As simple as that, that's all why the Shastra is there. Again, the metric is, when we are studying, whether it is Rudradhyaya or Upanishad or Gita or any of the scriptures you are studying, you have got to apply this rule, this metric. Is it clearing my confusion? Am I understanding the relationships properly? Am I doing my duty to the best extent in the station in which I am? Or am I neglecting it because of my either incomplete knowledge or incorrect knowledge? So that is why the Shastravatarana takes place. And now we will take up Rudra for study from next week.